YouTube, welcome to the podcast. This morning we're talking about Auburn football and a little pre-football camp thoughts. Of course, football camp starts in a couple of days. And the Auburn Tigers have a lot of questions, just like every other team in the country has questions that they want to get answered. And that's what fall camp is for. I mean, if teams don't come into the season with some type of speculation or some type of, not necessarily doubt, but these fall camps answer a lot of the concerns for the coaching staff. They get a better view of what the season could possibly bring. And it also gives some of the younger guys fresh out of high school an opportunity to battle for some positions. And sometimes you may even see some surprise breakout type guys. I'm actually looking for example, for Charles Moore, defensive end out of Mississippi, to possibly break out. There are a couple of other guys that could possibly break out, like Mark Anthony Richards out of Florida, running back, do-it-all type back, who could break out. He could also help out with the with kickoff returns, because Ryan Davis, who held that position down for the years that he was there, Ryan Davis departs for the NFL. That's a position that could potentially be open for the Tigers. But one of the guys that we really haven't talked about, in my opinion, probably as much as we should have here during the offseason, is Marlon Davidson. We were very excited right after the Music City Bowl when Derek Brown, Marlon Davidson, and Nick Coe, the defensive lineman for the Auburn Tigers, decided to come back, citing unfinished business. He's a senior this year. 6'3", 278 pounds, a very, very talented defensive end out of Greenville, Alabama. And if any of you guys are questionable as to where Greenville is, Greenville sits right off of I-65 headed towards Mobile. It's probably close to that, a little bit beyond the midway point between Birmingham and Mobile. Excellent football player out of that area, and has been pretty consistent with his statistics. Not necessarily a breakout over the top type player. He has been very productive as his tackling. I believe he needs to up the tackles a little bit, especially the solo tackles. 23 in 2016. 18 solo tackles in 2017 and 19 solo tackles in 2018. Need Marlon Davis to get a little bit more active, because I don't think his statistics justify his abilities. Now, mind you, the defensive end position for the Tigers is not one that typically garnishes a lot of statistical results, but it is a disruptive position that usually causes, say, the running back or the quarterback to be pressured into, say, the nose tackle or maybe even the buck linebacker, things of that nature. They actually facilitate pressure, but they might not always get credit for the results. But we're looking for Marlon Davidson to have a very, very nice season, to solidify a nice spot in the NFL. We think this defensive line could be one of the best that Auburn has seen in a long time. I was actually looking at some video footage on the defensive line for the weeks leading up to and the LSU game. Those guys played lights out up to that point. Now, they kind of tapered off after the LSU loss. That was a grueling loss for the Tigers. You're talking about, if Auburn beats LSU, you're talking about at least a 9-10 win season at that point, because the momentum would have been epic for the Tigers. And you're talking about literally a few minutes away, losing that game in the closing seconds of the ball game, pretty much deflating Auburn, I think, as a team. I don't think Auburn played the same after that particular game, and it was really painful to see those kids, go through quite possibly playing the most intense game of the season, only to come away with the loss in the closing seconds of the game. A very deflating I'm not going to say a demoralizing loss, but a very, very deflating loss. And you never saw that level of intensity from the Auburn team again until probably at points in the Alabama and Georgia game, and of course the Purdue game. So the Auburn Tigers, you look at Coach Gus Malzahn, he's very, very confident coming into this particular season, as he sat on the podium at the media days and was very, very confident that this football team, given, some things going their way, could possibly be a championship team. And that's bold words, especially coming from a coach who the media has all but put him on the hot seat and said, hey, if you don't win 8 games this year, you're out of here. That's very, very bold for a guy that has those types of expectations behind him. I think Gus Malzahn has definitely grown as a coach. If you look at the recruiting efforts on the outside, I think that the coaches are starting to see what it really takes to sustain a good roster in the college football ranks, and really what it takes to compete on a year in and year out basis. Because what I would think what Auburn coaching staff and program wants to get away from is that situation where you have the breakout season. You go 10-4, or you go 11-2, or you may even go to the SEC championship game and win that game and go to the college football playoffs. They want to stop the situations where, because of inconsistencies in recruiting, which has shown up over the years, that you have that really, really good season, but then it's followed up by 2, pretty mediocre seasons until the talent can build itself back up again. And now, you're in a position like, say, for instance, this year, the talent has built up again to where you have a solid 2-deep roster. And that's something that Auburn wants to have on a consistent basis to be able to compete year in and year out with the Georgias and the Alabamas and, those teams in the country. Because, see, it's not expected. It's a goal, but it's not expected necessarily that you're just going to run the table in the SEC every year. Too much talent. The rosters are too strong. However, you want to have a 2-deep talented roster, and maybe in some cases 3-deep, especially at the running back position. You definitely want to be stout there, because that cost Auburn mightily in the 2017 season. But you want to be 2-deep so that you have the opportunity to compete. And maybe an interception here, a fumble recovery for a touchdown there, a quarterback sack here can be the difference between, say, an 8-5 season and a 10-2 season with an opportunity down the stretch, because that's what you want to do. In the SEC West, give yourself an opportunity down the stretch and let the chips fall as they may. We look at this particular season as the Auburn Tigers have somewhat of a manageable slate of some winnable games. Of course, they got the trip to Texas to take on Oregon. Oregon will be a very talented football team. Then you got week 2 as Auburn takes on Tulane, and then Woody Barrett makes his return to Auburn with the Kent State Golden Flashes. Then SEC play begins as Auburn takes on Texas A&M, then takes on Mississippi State, Florida, Arkansas, LSU. Now, a lot of folks will look at this and say that this is a quote-unquote brutal stretch. I think that is yet to be seen. Now, I'm being a little bold here. I think there's some question marks with Texas A&M. They lost some key players, especially on the defense, and they lost Travion Williams, who seems like he's been there forever. Then you look at Mississippi State, who's losing Nick Fitzgerald and a few other guys. There are definitely some question marks there. I'll even say last year as Auburn takes on Mississippi State, if Auburn would have had any level of consistent offense, I think Auburn wins that game, 10 points, maybe 2 touchdowns. Even, you look at the touchdown that was taken away from Boobie Whitlow. Well, he took it from himself by fumbling on the half-inch line. You just don't want those plays to come to question. I understand that play could have gone either way, but you got to protect the football. Don't even let a play like that be up for debate, and move on. Auburn has the momentum, probably reignites the defense, and now all of a sudden you got a ball game. Auburn probably wins that game, okay? Tennessee, of course, that was a definite debacle. Jarrett Stidham responsible for some very crucial turnovers, including a scoop and score for the Tennessee Volunteers. So those are things that keep you from. That's the difference last year. The overall difference between Auburn, winning 9-10 games versus winning 7. And that's something moving forward that the Tigers definitely want to protect themselves from, because you look at that stretch between Texas A&M and LSU, there's some very, very good opportunities there. You talk about, yes, going to Florida is a tough place to play, but you're talking about a inexperienced offensive line for the Florida Gators. We really don't know how much stock to put into the late season for the Florida Gators. We don't know really how good they will be this year. We think they will be at least a contender in the SEC East to challenge Georgia, but we don't know. And I think the media, just based on, you gotta go based on the information given, pretty much dominating Michigan in that bowl game, and it gives you in a top 10 recruiting class, gives you every reason to believe that Florida could be all right this year, But at the same time, Auburn is not a team that should go into any of these games with any type of intimidation, because like I said before, you have one of the better defensive lines in the country, or the potential to be. You also have a talented situation at quarterback. No matter who starts, gives Auburn a good chance to win. Also, a very, very, very talented and diverse set of receivers and running backs. I think the secondary for the Auburn Tigers is going to be absolutely phenomenal. A lot more athletic than in the past, where you had, say, Carlton Davis, and then you have everybody else. I think you have a gang of guys on the secondary that could really make this secondary just as nasty as the defensive line. Big question mark for the Tigers, though, going into fall camp, is the linebacker position, but I think they're in good hands as well. Athletic. We do believe that they will be a little more athletic than they've been in the past. Okay, so those are some things also to look out for. This is the morning podcast. We're talking a little Auburn football here. Once again, my name is Kennard Vernon Stewart as we continue to cover the Auburn Tigers. Hope you guys have tuned in. If you're tuning in the middle, we've already talked about Auburn and some of the things that lie ahead with football camp. Talk a little bit about Marlon Davidson, who is really, really set up to have a nice season. He's changed some things about himself personally, especially the most notable change has been his diet. He said he's not eating the Three Musketeers no more. He's laying off the honey buns. He's laying off the trips to Burger King. He wants to get himself in better shape. Now, I will tell you, what you put in your body, man, makes a lot of difference, especially when you talk about the SEC media days. The coaches talked a lot about how players have to transition their diets from, high school. Because we all know how we even ate in high school. You eat a honey bun, Doritos, a Faygo, orange drink, and you're good to go. You go out and play a football game. But you go from that to having like real deal meals like salmon, steaks, and eating 4 and 5 times a day, because nutrition plays a huge part in an athlete's performance. Even as an adult, it plays a big part of your performance, because I know I committed to doing some forms of intermittent fasting, and it's amazing. Those items are absolutely amazing when you can treat your body correctly as it relates to nutrition. So big shout out to Marlon Davis and the coaching staff for putting those things on display that we normally don't even think about as factors. We forget that these guys, at times, I don't think we do it on purpose, but subconsciously at times we forget that these are young men, young human beings with feelings, and they have to have those things to make themselves productive, not only on the football field, but in the classroom as well, because you have to have a high level of cognitive function to be productive on the football field, especially on a Power 5 level, and to be productive in the classroom as well. So a lot of respect that I give for the student athlete, because I told you guys before, when I was at Alabama A&M University, that's where I went to school first. I attempted to walk on. Alabama A&M, a FCS school that has actually played against Auburn recently. And when I got up in there and saw how hard you have to work to just make the team, because I was a walk-on, of course, like, nope. I think about a week and a half, 2 weeks in, I'm like, man, I can't balance this. And I wasn't even in the tough part yet. So it made me garnish a lot of respect for what the student athletes have to go through on a week in and week out basis, and then having to attempt to balance some type of social life. Even I don't see how they have the time. But anyway, very excited about fall camp as the Auburn Tigers and the rest of the SEC get ready to start to piece together start to piece together how the season will go. Looking for those breakout guys, and I'm really excited about it, because for one, I believe for the first time in quite some time, there's going to be a lot more parity in the SEC, meaning that the teams are going to be there's going to be a lot more. It's not going to be so one-sided. I don't think it's going to be a situation like in the SEC East where, all you got is Georgia and everybody else. I think you got a very talented roster in Georgia, probably one of the most talented in college football. Got some question marks at the receiver position. But, when you look at Missouri, you look at Florida, of course, you got two teams that we feel, because Georgia traditionally hasn't played well against Missouri anyway. And like I said, Florida, it's some question marks there, but it's reason to believe that they will be highly competitive this year in the SEC East. Maybe even thinking that the game down in not in Jacksonville, could be a determining factor for the SEC East. Really looking much forward to that particular football game as a very, very pivotal stop in the path for the SEC East. So some of the things that I'm looking forward to when we talk about the fall camp for the Auburn Tigers, definitely looking forward to how the quarterback battle will transpire. Also, the running back position. I'm really, really intrigued at how Carnell Williams is going to affect the outcome, going to affect the potential of this running back position, because he's got so many variations of how, he can approach the game, ranging from Boobie Whitlow all the way down to Malik Miller. You got a lot of ranges of talent that can be utilized, especially when you have Gus Malzahn as a play caller. Really, really makes things pretty interesting for the Auburn Tigers. And also on defense, Kevin Steele has done a great job for the Auburn defense for the last few years. On average, no team scores over 20 points against Kevin Steele, and that's including, I want to say, the game against Alabama. 52 points was the most that he surrendered during his tenure as an Auburn Tiger defensive coordinator. So, like I said before, we're looking very much forward to this fall camp. Really, really think the SEC is going to be a little bit more competitive than they've been in the past. There are going to be a lot of shakeups. I feel the biggest shakeup, in my opinion, will take place between the number 2 and number 4 spots in the SEC. The number 2 and the number 4 spot, where it could be any of them. It could be LSU, then Texas A&M, then Auburn. It could be Alabama, Auburn, LSU, then Texas A&M. You could flip-flop the area after the number 1 team, which I think unanimously, just being lazy about it, to be honest, one of the better teams in the country traditionally, because of the way they recruit, because of the way that they approach the game, the business and systematic way that they approach the game, and the development of the players. You just can't argue too much about Alabama being the number one team in the SEC West. Like I said before, because of the way they approach the game, okay, and the way that they recruit. You always top and middle heavy recruiting wise. What I mean by that, they usually get a 5-star every year, but they're loaded in the middle with high end 4-star recruits. There's a difference between, say, a 97 4-star and say a low end 4-star, say around the 90s, the low 90s. That's why I think with recruiting, I think they should change. There should be tiers to the 4-star recruit, because there's such a wide range of talent, because no 4-star recruit is created equal. So I think this is going to be a really nice test. Getting off that subject, this is going to be a really nice test for the SEC to see where they are as far as how these coaching upgrades have turned out for the SEC, and how the upgrades in recruiting for some teams, how that will translate into the power of the SEC moving forward. Got some neutral site games down the line for some SEC teams. We're going to talk about that in another video. But once again, we're just kind of having a little conversation before the fall camps. Definitely going to be tuned in. I know a lot of you guys are definitely going to be locked in to the fall camps. Once again, it's Kennard Vernon Stewart here for Auburn Football Sports Talk. This morning, just doing a little conversation piece for you guys before you get ready to go to work. And maybe as you listen to this Auburn Sports Talk, as you work out or whatever you do during the day. Some of you ladies, you're sitting at Starbucks, want to listen to a little bit of Auburn football. We are here for you. Kennard Vernon Stewart again on the podcast, where it's always great to be an Auburn Tiger War Eagle.